Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, variety is the spice of life, and we've got 2 top 25 conversations to have, which is twice as nice. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use our code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you, my man, and kicking off, well, another episode here in a different kind of way and maybe somewhat ahead of schedule is the way I would describe this. We're basking in the glow of a top 25 ranking just by a smidge, just crept in the back door. Number 25 is where the Red Raiders check in this week. But, man, I don't know what you had on your checklist for year number 1 under Grant McCasland, particularly with the way that it came to be and the time in which and at which your team was assembled. Some of these guys are brought out to West Texas, but I said it a moment ago, and I think at least for me personally, it's how I view it. Are we ahead of schedule? Kind of feels that way to a degree, still understanding, of course, only 3 games in to the Big 12 slate, so we know what's coming up next with 3 of 4 and 4 of 6 away from United Supermarkets Arena. But, man, feels good to get a little bit of national pub after some of these recent wins.
Well, and especially ahead of the curve when you consider the fact that you're without one of your starters for the remainder of the year. I mean, that is one that you just got to add that caveat with whatever happens going forward, whether they continue on or whether they struggle a bit or whatever it may be. We have to remember that Devin Cambridge isn't a part of this, because that's the part that if you told me you're 3-0 in the league, one of 2 teams in the Big 12, and you tell me all this and there's no Devin Cambridge as a part of it, I just not sure I would have bought that, what you were trying to sell. But it's been a while since you've been under the radar, I guess, if that makes sense, because I think you had some runs, obviously, with the Elite Eight, the Final Four, the title game and all that, 18, 19 seasons. Mark's first year, you go to the Sweet 16. There's some big-time expectations last year, and then you fell way short of that, started out the league 0-8. This one has been kind of fun, though, because it wasn't necessarily expected. And, again, you haven't done anything yet, and this top 25 ranking doesn't mean anything, really. But it's a perception type deal that it speaks to a different coach, different staff, different group of players still getting it done here, which tells you that this is a pretty good job, that you can win here, that it's starting to be kind of more of a standard. It's not just like so foreign for everybody around the country to see Texas Tech in the top 25. One of eight Big 12 schools in the top 25. 8.
Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, and in your next 4 games against the 5th ranked one, the 20th ranked one, the 15th ranked one, and the 19th ranked one. So, yeah, it's like you didn't show up to the party, the top 25 party, alone. People brought there's a lot in attendance here.
Yeah, and we're going to hedge this 6 ways from Sunday because we've got to continue to point out, as you've already suggested, this means nothing in reality. For the fans, maybe for the players, it's something nice. But also another hedge here is the fact that what you've got in your rear view, as you were kind of running down for us on yesterday's episode, as far as net rankings and things like that, I mean, the 3 that you've beaten so far are not 3 that are in, like, I guess Texas is still a quadrant 1 win, I think, but these others are not, and you're looking at some of, and I don't know what K-State's going to wind up being. Look pretty salty to me, but we'll see, I guess, what they wind up being. But point being is you've faced so far a lower tier of the Big 12 Conference. Thankfully, you've taken care of business and maybe have suggested that you're not going to be a part of a lower tier, but the stoutest obviously still yet to come.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're about to enter into a next phase. But like with some of the rankings that I just told you and everything like that, because I think any of the next wins you get would be right up there with your best one, which is a win in Austin to this point on paper.
Yeah.
But in the top 25 again, it doesn't. It's one of those deals that it's twofold, right? It doesn't really, it just doesn't matter. Like it doesn't factor anything. However, because the net ranking and all the things that put you in postseason and all that, they don't care about some poll or what some SID or some coach or whatever voted, whatever. So I'm making that clear, but. You are going to use that from a recruiting standpoint. I'm already seeing it used. Hey, top 25 matchup at home on Saturday. Accurate.
That's right.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all true. So as long as you kind of understand like the dynamic of it, it doesn't, because there's plenty of teams that are kind of ranked but don't make the tournament field when it's all said and done, and all people are like, well, what? How? But it's just so I think we need to make sure that we educate the folks out there. But from a perception standpoint, you recruit toward it, sell tickets toward it. ESPN and whoever has these games will promote that. To try to get people's interest up in watching a game like a top 25 matchup. I mean, like tonight, you've got Iowa State and BYU. The BYU Cougars that'll be here on Saturday. They are hosting Iowa State. That's a top 25 matchup. I mean, so that kind of moves the needle a bit. But anyway, just wanted to make sure that we that's an all-encompassing conversation and we kind of grasp what that means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, those are all the hedges. Those are all the qualifiers. And at the end of the day, I don't care because, again, year one of a new administration after a belly flop of a season ago, starter loss for the year, and somehow you found your way into a ranking at all, that's going down smooth every time. Outside of Iowa State, BYU tonight, you also got Kansas on the road from Stillwater to take on the Cowboys. Baylor visits K-State there in Manhattan, see if the Purple Wildcats can bounce back. And Texas Christian now enters the top 25 at number 19. They're in Cincinnati to take on the Bearcats. I'll probably screw this up before we move on, but I wanted to mention it. I think this is from ESPN, remaining strength of schedule, something like out of the top 15 or 16 nationally, you'll find every Big 12 team. Every Big 12 team obviously speaks to the strength of the league, and we are getting a full dose of that strength as Grant McCaslin and the Red Raiders hit the road. We'll be back around, of course, hoops heavy on tomorrow's episode as we get set for Red Raiders and Cougars from Houston with Kelvin Sampson and gang trying to bounce back. Hopefully, Texas Tech stands in the way of that. We got top 25 on the brain, so why not slide right on in to a too early top 25? First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And football is close to wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. So many ways to spice up the action with FanDuel's safe, secure, and easy-to-use app. Are you really even parlaying if you're not visiting FanDuel's Parlay Hub? I doubt it. So get to FanDuel.com/lockedon today. And if you're a new customer, take advantage of $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place only a $5 bet with FanDuel at FanDuel.com/lockedon, official partner of the NFL. That must mean we're talking football, Chris. And the thing of note here as we enter into the new Big 12 era, seen a few of these different ones being kicked out so far. Yahoo Sports had one. Brett McMurphy, the Action Network, had one as well. The new Big 12 represented to the tune of, I think, 5 or maybe 6 inclusions, depending on which one of these you're looking at, or maybe some elsewhere. And not yet here to say, hey, the new Big 12 is going to be loaded. But it seems like among some of those teams like Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Utah, Arizona, Kansas here or there getting a mention. West Virginia shows up in a way too early top 25 poll. Red Raiders not on this list, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you new Big 12 loaded for bear. But there's some attention on the league, it seems like, as we sit here, 30,000 feet away from kickoff in a few months.
Yeah, I think because I looked at, the Athletics, look at the Yahoo one, Brett McMurphy, as you mentioned, that they were, ESPN had one, it was that was kind of the thing to release last week after the title game was played, is it's good content and we all look at it. And I was looking at that. I probably looked at that more so than I did the basketball current poll. Just to get a gauge on, again, doesn't mean anything, but it's like I wanted to know what people thought, or kind of what the way that this offseason was going to go from a projection standpoint and all those. And we're already seeing it change a bit, because Arizona, since all that was released, has lost their head coach, and they're going to have to replace that head coach, and they're losing some players to the portal. And the portal that's why it's really hard to peg a lot of these teams, because you just don't know. You go with coach, you go with quarterback, and that's kind of why, I think with Utah getting some respect in something like this. Well, Kyle Whittingham and then Cam Rising, who didn't play this past year because of injury, well, he's back. Those are the duos that you're essentially voting on. And then when you can add some other, because like Kansas getting a lot of love. You're right. I've seen them as like a playoff dark horse, mentioned, and it's all incumbent upon Jalen Daniels being healthy or not, which he has not shown the ability to do. And for as much as grief as Tyler Shuck ever got, Jalen Daniels is the exact same person. Jalen Daniels was the preseason Big 12 Player of the Year before the season, quarterback for Kansas, and then just missed the bulk of the year. And after missing a lot of the season before. So, but that's why people are going to look at Kansas and go, oh, they got a lot back. They got Devin Neal back. And, then you look at Kansas State, Avery Johnson. But those were the Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State, Kansas, Arizona. Those were kind of the nucleus. And I did see West Virginia, who won 9 games and won their bowl game, bring their quarterback back, their head coach is back, and all that. So I get it. But it does speak to a lot of like depth and entertainment for us in that, trying to figure this league out, because I think I've seen people, look at power ranking and everything, and like they'll have Texas Tech listed 8th or 9th. And I've seen other fan bases point to like, ooh, Texas Tech way too low on that deal. But I get it. Like Iowa State went to a bowl game, and they've got a lot back. Matt Campbell back, at least for now. You've got, so the TCU, I think, has done well in the portal and brings some folks back, including head coach and quarterback and all that stuff. So, it's going to be kind of a jumbled mess, but it could be a fun one in that, trying to figure out who's going to rise above here, because there's just more than likely 1 to 2 playoff bids on the line. The champ gets one. Yeah. Maybe somebody else can put another season together to get. But yeah, you've got some quality depth here in this league.
Well, as long as it's a blue blood that's in that second spot, they'll get oh wait, I've got to update my Big 12 talking points. Once upon a time, Texas Christian Baylor win the league. League sucks. UTOU win the league. Great league, multi-bid league. By the way, best of luck to the Kansas Jayhawks with that dark horse conversation. You saw how it went for us. We had to shoot the horse, send him to the glue factory. We were riding a 3-wheel motorcycle by the end of the season out on the field. And some of that is to be taken literal. Chris, I wonder, before we move along here, I want to get it to a coaching conversation as it relates to the new Big 12. You mentioned the Arizona departure, which we'll weigh into that convo. We'll wrap up today's episode with in just a second. But I wonder, how much weight are you throwing to these Pac-12 transplants? I think we all understood kind of how we were going to anticipate the entry from the other 4 with Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU. I think we also understand from a basketball standpoint, it's a step up clearly for some of those guys. Now, the Big 12 is a football league versus the Big 12 is a basketball league is not the same weight necessarily that you're allotting to each of those conversations as they compare nationally. Pac-12 had a good year last year, but the Pac-12 typically pretty light in the britches, and I would have put the Big 12 up against the Pac-12 as far as the quality of the depth, any year, really going back over the last decade and a half or so. Obviously, you got Utah, you got Arizona. We've had plenty of momentum behind those programs. You mentioned the word entertainment. If we were doing an entertainment ranking, a team we didn't mention would be at the top of the list. That's Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes, the car crash you can't look away from. But you think these guys are kicking in the door to the new Big 12? Is it going to be an acclamation for them? And this is just one or two men's opinions on this. They could be varying far and wide, I'm sure, depending on who you talk to. But what kind of weight are you throwing behind these guys? Or as far as expectations are concerned, how do you see it as they enter this new Big 12 era?
Yeah, I think all will be really heard from football wise, except for Arizona State. I think they're really in just a bad spot, I guess, right now. But other than that, because I think Colorado will make noise. You can take that literally or figuratively, but I mean they've got a really good quarterback, and Travis Hunter is one of the best players in the country. Period. I think they've added more to it, so they will be involved. But I mean, Arizona is the tricky one there. But they're just coming off their best season in 25 years. I mean, they won 10 games. They just beat Oklahoma. That they really, and they were bringing Fafita, the kid that was playing quarterback for him, supposed to come back. Now, does that roster get splintered a bit? There's already been some portal entries. I don't know what to make of that, because they were kind of thought to be one of the favorites coming in. They had a lot coming back, including, like I said, quarterback. But I mean, Jed Fish has taken the bulk of that staff now to the University of Washington with him. Yep. So, and I think the player exodus is just beginning, but I don't know who's going to get that job. I don't know what they bring in, but they're not the contender that we would have thought. They're just not going to be. Could be very, competitive, and all that, depending on what, because one of their top running backs has already left. And so but Utah is the one that is kind of the most fascinating. Utah has been a standard a bit in the Pac-12 for a bit now. They've won multiple Pac-12 championships. Kyle Whittingham is a mainstay there. I think they do it. They play a certain style and have an identity. I think that casual observers from outside the state, as we get to learn more about these two fan bases, I think it's going to be fascinating to see whether does BYU bug you more, or does Utah bug you more, or does neither bug you, or do they both bug you? I don't know. Because those two, the holy war, I guess they call it, they hate each other. It's a lot of animosity and a lot of similarities and kind of style of play and all that. But Utah, I think that the Utah fans, which is why the BYU fans get so annoyed with them, but the Utah fans, I think you kind of gather that they came into this deal kicking and screaming, one. Two, they think they're going to come in here and run this deal. And I just don't know if I buy that. I think it may be very difficult to play up there in Salt Lake City and all those things, but I just don't know if they're ready to roll in here and run this deal. I don't know if I buy that. But yeah, you've certainly added some flavor here to the Big 12 conference for sure. It should be so
the best of the feasible options. There's no doubt about it. Brett Yormark was able to gather, and certainly the entertainment factor, I don't think will be running short. And maybe the parity factor is something we're going to really get a big dose of as the years roll by. We'll have to wait and see. Let's wrap up our conversation sort of in the same vein, but you mentioned the head coaching departure there from Arizona. So that may actually impact this conversation as we look to the men in the headsets on the sideline. Just a simple question. If we're doing a Big 12 head coaching power ranking, what does it look like at the top? Coming into this conversation, you certainly would give some credence to guys like Whittingham or Fish. And I think as you look back to the original Big 12 or the Hateful Eight remainders, which is where I would have to start it. I don't know how you feel about it, but it seems like Mike Gundy's league. I mean, the track record of success and the length at which it has gone on and on and on just can't be ignored. You know, Chris Kleiman, I think, is going to be thought of in a somewhat similar category as well. Has not been there for anywhere near as long, but has had some consistent success and obviously a program that you respect. But I would weigh pretty heavily with some of those maybe newcomers, save now one that was formerly in Tucson, Arizona. But how do you think it somewhat stacks up? And would you insert some of those newcomers into that upper echelon? First, today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical, and I hope this podcast is a great escape from the nutso realities of life, but just because it is an escape doesn't mean those realities have gone away. And one of the latest pieces of wildness I've heard, according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right in the middle of flu season. Can you imagine how helpless you'd feel if your spouse or kids were sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the medication they needed? You don't have to because of the peace of mind you're going to get with Jase Medical and the Jase Case. The Jase Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics that treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including respiratory infections, sinus issues, dermatological infections, and many more. These things can affect anybody, so be one of those anybody's that goes to jasemedical.com right now to receive your 12-month supply of your daily medication. And remember to use our promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. At jasemedical.com, you're going to complete a physician assessment that'll then be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Never been more important to be prepared, so take the quick step to do so for your family and go to jasemedical.com and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. With Jase Medical. How do you think it somewhat stacks up, and would you insert some of those newcomers into that upper echelon?
Yeah, and I don't know if Jedd Fisch would have been at the top of this. He certainly would have been in the conversation just because he turned that thing around. That they had been bad at Arizona, and then they made them not only relevant but really scary for a lot of folks in the Pac-12. And then they rolled in, kind of thumped Oklahoma and San Antonio in the bowl game, and was bringing a lot back. What's fascinating is that I think what you're going to start to see in the coming years, and you're already kind of starting to see that, is that when the SEC and the Big Ten have openings, the Big 12 will be a league where they look. And I don't know how I feel about that. It's a compliment, but it's And I think that you see that with Washington, and that you just looked at the list of candidates. I mean, it was filled up with just the Big 12 coaches. Guess what's going to happen if Jim Harbaugh takes an NFL job? I mean, doesn't mean that anybody's leaving, but you're going to see the Leipolds, the Klymans, the Campbells all mentioned as candidates right there in the Midwest. I think it speaks to the quality of coaches that you have. And you have to debate internally to yourself, man, am I good making $4 or $5 million a year at some of these places, or do I need to really go get in the pressure cooker and make like 8 or 9 a year?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's up to these folks to decide what they want to do,
And their wives.
And family. Yeah, absolutely. Because some of these folks are very appreciated where they are at. They don't have you don't have the expectation of like, hey man, if you go 12-1 and lose to Michigan, we might can you, Ryan Day. It's like one of those kinds of, and so I don't think that you're in a spot like that in a lot of these cities. You mentioned best coaches and all that, and we're still, I think Joey's, he's had a really good tenure here with 2 years, and they've won 15 games and won 2 bowl games. Anybody that would have been told that before he was hired would have been like, hell yeah, man,
Sure.
But like anytime these conversations come up, who belongs at or near the top to me is Mike Gundy.
Yeah.
As quirky and as buried as people have tried to, put, It's because I mean
he can't be killed.
and yet he is a model. He's kind of like the Winningham, maybe minus a few league titles. But I think that's the criticism you can give Mike Gundy is, okay, overall you haven't beat Oklahoma enough, and you haven't won the Big 12 enough. But other than that, it's like he beats everybody else. But yeah, he's still, and they're going to be one of the favorites too. They bring quarterback, running back, all offensive line back, and then you got Mike Gundy, and so I think he belongs in a conversation like this for sure if you're talking about coaches. But it's going to be interesting to see these openings in the future, or potentially could be happening any minute with like a Michigan and where they look, because I think there's a lot of Big 12 flavor that is a lot. There's a lot to like, I guess, in your league.
And there's a lot of cash to throw around in the other leagues, and will only become more. And that conversation will extend to assistant coaches, I think, as well. But there's an interesting smattering there. Our guy here in the LBK, unfortunately, what I used to call Mr. February is kind of Mr. December right now. The recruiting results off the charts from a Texas Tech perspective. Got to get that to translate in season now, and maybe they can do some of that type of work in 2024. But there's some interesting names out there that we don't even mention in the very upper echelon, but have got some achievements on their resume, some much bigger than others. But, Gus Malzahn is in this league. Lance Leipold is one that's on every coaching hot sheet as we sit here right now. You got a guy in Fort Worth that went to a national championship game just a couple of years ago. So there's an interesting combination. You do have to make way for some of the newcomers, I think. But I guess my top two would be in Stillwater and Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah, and like Dave Aranda's won the league.
Yep.
I mean, he's got a Big 12 championship on his resume. It's like for as much of a circus as this thing was in Waco this past season. I mean, he's 2 seasons removed from winning the Big 12 title. I mean, so
Matt Campbell, better than anybody in the history of the program in Ames. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and yet they were. I mean, remember them this year? They had the gambling scandal. It's like, dude, they may not win a game or two. That's and not only that, they win 7 and had I think a 6-3 record in the Big 12. Lost their bowl game to Memphis, which was a road game for them basically. But they lose their quarterback, Hunter Deckers, I think, and so many different. Chaotic things that happen with that program in the offseason with like, who got caught gambling? Like, I mean, another one, and it's like, what are we doing? Why is no other state looking into this kind of stuff? And yet, because it was like all in the state of Iowa. I'm like, man, unlucky for y'all, man. I hope nobody in Texas is wagering on anything. Yeah,
Texas,
but that was the fact. And so I do think he bugs me because it's like he wears his hat with the brim like real curled up,
keeping the nose in the mailbox.
And he chews Bubblicious, I think, gum. It's like he's always got that, big wad of gum going. But no, he's a good coach, man. And he's a perfect fit for a place like Iowa State, which, that's one of your trickier games next year. And I've told you that. Well, I think it was New Year's resolution. It's like, please don't send me there in November. Make that one a late September. Yeah, make that a late September, early October, please.
Well, he's one of those like Mike Gundy. Like, I know you may look at some Matt Campbell win-loss totals and think, okay, why is the attention there? But that's probably because you hadn't looked at the history of Iowa State football. Mike Gundy has done such a great job over the last number of years that you may not even know they were coming in as a 2, 3, 4-win team in some early years of the Big 12 conference before he takes over.
Well, look at the new coach at University of Houston, Willie Fritz. I mean, he's had multiple double-digit win seasons. I mean, he took Tulane to, the Big Six, New Year's Six Bowl, and beat USC.
Top 25 ranking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, like, that became a standard there. So he's a phenomenal coach. So yeah, I just you're not hurting in that category, I guess I should say, as far as regardless of what Arizona. I'll be fascinated to see kind of what Arizona does from who they hire to replace Jed Fish. But yeah, you've got a lot of personalities and quality coaches and all that stuff. Cincinnati's guy, is still somewhat new. Just trying to think of some of the ones we didn't hit on.
We hadn't even mentioned Primetime, who's done everything but win
Dion.
games. So there's still that thought of winning games.
In September, he did. In September, it was just the rest of the months that were a bit of a struggle. But but he'd won at Jackson State and all that. He's like fascinating to pay attention to. I agree there.
Yeah, he'll be filling up the newspaper. There's no doubt about that, one way or another. Wildly entertaining. I root for either entertaining or quality head coaches to be in this league, but just an update to the new members of the league. We do not root for the Big 12 among one another as some kinship family. We're not chanting Big 12. It's Texas Tech versus everybody. Just the way we approach it from the 806. You do you, and take your own approach. All right, good stuff today, Chris. Enjoy the conversation as always. We're back hoops heavy tomorrow to get set for a monster challenge on the road as the Red Raiders will be in Houston to take on the Cougars, man. We'll see you then. Looking forward to it.
You got it, man. We'll do it. Keep hope alive, everybody. And that was fun talking top 25s plural. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah, it was good.
And it's okay to be a sick, addicted football fan. We've got present top 25 hoops to talk about. All right, we'll give you about 8 or 9 minutes on that. We've got far in the future football top 25. Maybe we'll roll for 15 or so. It's okay to acknowledge the addiction. We're here to do that on the regular on Locked On Texas Tech. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. We hope to see you back here for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.